All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. Welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Governor Mike Braun wants to tailor economic development to each region across the state. That's according to the Indiana Secretary of Commerce, David Adams. Adams is a business consultant. He has previously served as commissioner of the Department of Workforce Development. He sat down with our government reporter, Garrett Bergquist, to explain Braun's economic development agenda.
And joining us now is Indiana Secretary of Commerce, David Adams. Mr. Secretary, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell me how these first few months in office have gone, and how are you carving out this role?
Yeah, so, a couple of things happened when the governor, prior to coming into office, really took a look at state government and said, we've got a lot of agencies doing a lot of things. And so as a business person, he understood that for us to be more efficient, there might be a better way to reorganize state government. So the governor organized us into 8 secretaries reporting directly to him as a cabinet. And within the commerce vertical as he's created, I have traditionally what we call the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. But I also have responsibility for all workforce development. So DWD, Department of Workforce Development. We did have the governor's workforce cabinet, but as a consolidation to be more efficient, we've rolled that out into the Department of Workforce Development. Have responsibility for tourism, or I like to think about visitor attraction, which includes the Arts Commission, the ports. And so we've got a pretty expansive operation here, and I think there's a recognition that workforce and economic development are tightly linked.
What would you say are the 3 most impactful things that you were able to get done during this past legislative session in terms of impact to the average Hoosier?
Yeah, so one of the big areas is innovation and entrepreneurship around Main Street Indianans, which is one of the 4 objectives the governor has given me. Today here in Indiana, we've got approximately 600,000 small to mid-sized businesses. And if you think about it on a volume basis, that represents about 99% of all businesses here in Indiana. We know that there's been a lot done on the venture side to really excite about entrepreneurship through building a business. But we also know that there's the opportunity, entrepreneurship through acquisition. How do we, first support the small businesses that are in a lot of our rural communities that are really important? And this is not lost on the governor, being a Main Street entrepreneur, creating a successful business in Jasper, Indiana, as well as First Lady Marine. But how do we also inspire those 25 to 55-year-olds that might be thinking about, hey, there's an opportunity to acquire a business. How do we help, remove the friction and streamline this process to really make that happen? In addition, the governor is very focused on a regional economic development model. So through executive order, he's charged me with helping us to define the economic and workforce regions. And I think we got a good base to build off of with the READY programs that have been institutionalized since 2021. So that was another big achievement for us. There's more to come in that arena, and again, happy to talk about that. And then I think the other big piece of this is a recognition that we need to help the 3.3 million Hoosiers that are currently working, and what can we do to really help them get these skills needed to fill some of these high-value, high-wage jobs.
Let's talk a little bit more about that economic development strategy. The governor has said that he wants a 92-county strategy. Tell me a little bit about how that looks in practice on the ground.
I've been fortunate over the last 6 or so months to get out and visit all 15 regions. And what's become very clear in terms of visiting those regions is that there are things that are genuine and authentic to who they are. B, they're very excited about the fact that they've come together in some ways that they normally wouldn't have come together. And I think there's the opportunity from a regional standpoint for us to take the next step, which is in terms of their 5 and 10-year goals. How do we as a state support their strategies in terms of what they want to develop? So what's really important to the governor and myself is that we focus on every corner of the state. And by taking this regional approach, we'll be able to really lean into what's genuine and authentic to a community and actually lean into helping support them, as opposed to how we've traditionally operated things, which is everything at the state level. So we really want to invert economic development to support not just businesses, but as importantly, how do we support the workforce, which is a critical component in terms of every business we speak with today.
Governor Braun has ordered several IEDC programs specifically to stop using race or ethnicity as criteria for grant awards, and those include Elevate Me and the Collaborative or Community Collaboration Fund. Those are programs that were specifically targeted toward minority entrepreneurs. So how do you plan to encourage business growth among historically marginalized groups if you're taking away that criteria?
Yeah, we want to be inclusive of all. I mean, I think the net of this is we want to expand the venture side of this, and I think it's one of the key reasons why we broke these things up. Traditionally, we've had venture and we've had Main Street all allocated into one bucket. Specifically, by pulling Main Street out and focusing on that as a vertical as well as venture as a vertical, I think we're going to be able to accelerate that. But I think we want to continue to be inclusive of everyone in terms of the development, but understand there's a couple of different swim lanes in terms of how we want to pursue this. And we want to put metrics around all of this as well and report out on those metrics in terms of the successes that we're having and, candidly, some of the challenges that need to be corrected.
So do you see those metrics being used to target groups that historically have not had a lot of economic investment and putting more investment into those communities anyway?
Well, I think what we're going to lean into is what are the regions trying to do. So really, instead of us at the state level trying to dictate or try to manage what might happen at a state level, how do we lean into, from a strategic standpoint, what a particular region's trying to do with venture, with Main Street, with existing businesses, with new businesses that they might want to bring into this. And we know there's going to be some common metrics that are going to be important to all of us, which is one, a population growth, employment growth, which is really important to economic development. How do we help improve the GDP per capita of each of those regions, and really kind of start thinking about how do we report out on that on a regional basis, and also start to really hone in on the percent of individuals that have college degrees. And for communities that are actually establishing goals in each of those categories in terms of where they're at today, but where they want to go, how are they going to get there? That's the key piece of this, is strategically start to put a proactive plan in terms of how they move from where they're at to where they want to go. And we're really going to do this on a regional basis.
What's your plan for the LEAP district?
So we're going to continue to evaluate, that area. You've probably seen that we've put up some land sales of areas that we think are not going to be useful to what we're doing. We're leaning very heavily into the fact that Eli Lilly's made a significant investment there around advanced manufacturing. I would contend probably one of the, if not the most advanced manufacturing facilities in the world, and something that's very unique to what they're doing. We want to lean into what other advanced manufacturing businesses would make sense to be a part of that. But we're going to continue to evaluate the land that has been acquired, how we actually enable the vision that we plan to actually bring into practice, and what do we do going forward. So all that's continuing to be studied, so stay tuned on that.
You're overseeing a forensic audit of the IEDC right now. From what you have seen so far, was there evidence of wrongdoing at IEDC?
Well, as the governor's talked about, we're not really going to discuss a whole lot of this until after the audit findings come out. But I think in the era of transparency, which was the real focus here, we want to make sure that, if there are areas that have to be improved, that we're proactive in terms of getting those areas addressed. And you've got my commitment and the governor's commitment. We're going to do that. Make sure that we've got a transparent process here. And then if there are issues that get identified, that we get those things corrected.
Should Hoosiers be concerned about conflicts of interest, given that several members of the IEDC board were donors to the governor's campaign?
No, I don't think so, because what the governor's trying to do in establishing this board, and we'll continue to see how this evolves, is to really go back to this regional focus of how do we create a board here that really represents sectors and regions of the state of Indiana, so that it's not viewed as a central Indiana board or in some ways is just getting folks that are within a specific area. It's really the focus of how do we really disperse across the region to get the voices of the regions to help us with economic development moving forward, especially with this regional development strategy that's so critical to the governor and myself.
Secretary of Commerce David Adams, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be with you.
All right, coming up, the EPA announces a major policy change right here in Indianapolis. Welcome back. EPA officials say they plan to repeal a major Obama-era rule on greenhouse gases from tailpipes. They made that announcement right here in Indianapolis. Garrett Bergquist explains what this means for your vehicle.
President Trump's EPA administrator says getting rid of the endangerment finding would return to the original intent of the Clean Air Act.
If finalized, today's announcement would amount to the largest deregulatory action in the history of the United States.
The EPA issued the endangerment finding in 2009 during the Obama administration. It determined certain greenhouse gases cars and trucks emit, such as carbon dioxide and methane, threaten public health. The rule underpinned emission regulations over the past 16 years. Zeldin says the Trump administration's move brings the EPA into line with recent Supreme Court rulings.
This proposed rule is a proposal to eliminate the endangerment finding, to eliminate greenhouse gas standards, all the regulations that came out, including the electric vehicle mandates. We're also proposing to get rid of that much hated off-cycle credit for start-stop technology.
The EPA says transportation accounted for 28% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2022. That's the most of any sector. More than half of that came from light-duty vehicles such as passenger cars. The EPA says the typical passenger vehicle emits 4.6 metric tons of carbon dioxide every year. Environmental advocates say the move will aggravate extreme weather driven by climate change, and it throws away billions of dollars in investments in clean energy jobs.
The endangerment finding is the underwriting science that supports a lot of our protections and regulations around vehicle emissions, around smokestack emissions for our coal-fired power plants. So I don't buy that it's not going to impact our air and our water quality.
Zeldin says the new rule will be finalized after a 45-day public comment period. Carpenter tells me there likely will be lawsuits, so that won't necessarily be the end of the story. I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV and WishTV.com.
All right, coming up, Indiana's best political team assesses the state's economic development strategy and the impact of those EPA policy changes. All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Tom John, Democrat Dana Black. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
All right, let's begin with that interview that we heard at the top of the show, the Indiana Secretary of Commerce, David Adams. Now, Dana, I want to start with you. Adams says the state can use like other metrics to help marginalized communities. He and Braun said that they don't need specifically to target Black and Hispanic entrepreneurs, for example. How realistic is that?
Well, only if you want to keep Black and brown people from having the opportunity to excel, then I guess you don't need those metrics. Mind you, this is the same administration that says that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a horrible thing. But if you can't study the disparities within certain communities to understand how best to approach them, and you're not a member of that community, then how can you actually say what is best for that community? Yeah. So when I hear the metrics of we don't want to use Black and brown, honestly, that is just the worst way to look at it, because you have to look at the disparities and why they are happening. There are real reasons why Black and brown entrepreneurs are not getting the funding that they deserve to get to explore their opportunities. So the fact that they're saying that, it actually makes sense that they are saying it, because they don't believe that there are differences when we actually know the science and the data tells us that there are.
Tom, I'll let you chime in as well here.
I think the important thing is they have a fundamental belief that a rising tide lifts all boats, and they're focused on small entrepreneurs, many of whom are going to be Black and brown, many of whom are going to be from disadvantaged areas, and they want to empower that throughout the state. That's why they're moving to a regionalized model. That's why they've created the front door through OEI to make sure that there is a place that you can help people across agencies, that make sure people actually have the ability to move forward with their careers and move forward and employ both themselves, but then as their businesses grow wherever they grow, those businesses also will employ others throughout the state.
Dan, you don't buy it?
No, because honestly, if in our history we see that there has been intentionality in keeping Black and brown folks out of opportunities, we have to be just as intentional in making them included in those opportunities. I know that Republicans hate the word affirmative action, but when you already starting on third base and we ain't even at the ballpark, it's kind of hard to say, well, it's going to be okay for everybody. All tide, a rising tide lifts all boats. We would love to believe that. But historically, we have seen that is just not the case.
So what would make you more comfortable if what change could they do to make you a little more comfortable?
Well, first of all, they have to have diverse voices in the conversations when they're putting together the plan. Yeah. And this administration is not diverse whatsoever. So you have actually not spoken to the community that you say that you want to help. That's the first thing. Then you're going to get new ideas. You're going to get diverse ideas on how to actually offer opportunities to people. But when you're not even interested in bringing them in the room and having them at the table, then how do you even know that you're doing it the right way?
I mean, this is the start. July 1st was the start of the new biennium for this governor.
Yeah.
And really the ability to implement the vision that he began putting in place during the legislative session. You know, Dana, you should call him and give him input.
Oh, he ain't gonna talk to me. Are you kidding me?
I think he'll take all comers every Friday.
They're not. He's not. No, because I'm going to tell him the truth. And the fact that you're look at your cabinet, look at your administration. The fact that you don't have us in the room means you really ain't trying to hear from us.
All right. Well, let's move on to the EPA. It says that we'll begin the process to get rid of the endangerment rule. We talked about that a little while ago as well. Tom, we'll go to you. Indianapolis already has some of the worst air quality in the country. How do you feel about this?
Well, I think it's a good thing, and the reason is this was not the proper use of the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act was for soot. It was for toxic chemicals. It was for those sorts of things. This was, and pardon the term, a bastardization of those statutes in which they were used for the climate agenda, which I'm not saying that climate change isn't a thing, but you should actually have an honest discussion about climate change and not try and backdoor it. I mean, I was telling Dana earlier, okay, if it's carbon dioxide emissions, now the Clean Air Act can be used to regulate how much Coke you have and how much you distribute because, well, when you open your Coke, it's emitting carbon dioxide. And that's the problem with this, and that's the reason this is a good initiative, that it brings rationality back, and instead of backdooring using the Clean Air Act, which is about particulates, soot, those sorts of things that are bad for your lungs, this was just a backdoor to the climate agenda.
Well, Dana, to that point, should this rule have gone through Congress first to make it a little bit more difficult to make the change?
Probably it should have.
Yeah.
But we already know that our Congress is the least effective Congress we've had in decades. Now, I do find it interesting, and again, I know Tom is a great guy, but I struggle when Republicans talk about doing things backdoor, because literally that's what our General Assembly did all session was wait to the very end of the day and then put some backdoor deals in legislation. This is how they live their lives, honestly. Now, for me, I think this ignores science. We are the canary in the coal mine in this whole climate change situation are how insurance companies are leaving states because of catastrophic 100-year weather events that are happening every 3 weeks, right? And so when they are pulling out, because they're like, look, we're going to lose money in here because of climate change. I get what you're saying about the rules and following the rules, but again, Republicans ain't really good on that right now. I feel like it was for the greater good of looking at what is actually happening in our environment and trying to make positive changes, because we recognize right now, Indiana, they tell you if you have asthma, move, because you're not going to be able to breathe very well.
Hey, I want to get your thoughts on what's going on with ICE here in Marion County specifically. We had a big story that Garrett Bergquist covered over about a week ago. The overwhelming majority of arrests from ICE here in Marion County were people with criminal backgrounds, but there was a quarter percentage of them that did not fall into this. So I want to get your thoughts on this. How big of a problem is this? And also, what can we do going forward? Dana, we'll start with you.
This is an absolute huge problem because we have masked people who are supposedly on our taxpayer dollar who we cannot identify, can't figure out who they are, snatching people off the street. They're going to immigration court hearings and taking people who are actually following the rules and going to their court-appointed meeting with judges about their immigration case, and they're disappearing them. This is a real problem because, unfortunately, we have seen this historically where you have a society that wants to demonize immigrants. This is not the first time it's happened in America. It will not, unfortunately, be the last time it happens in America. But what these ICE agents are doing, and the fact that they are allowed to be masked. Now, mind you, these are the same people that was having an issue with putting on masks during COVID. But now they don't mind wearing masks when they're snatching people off of the street. This is a problem. And a lot of the folks that are being taken off the street, they're leaving children. They're literally leaving children on the curb, and they're having to find their way home because they've taken their guardian. This is a problem. The fact that we've lost humanity is a problem.
I got to get Tom in here because we're almost done.
I mean, the simple fact is we're talking about illegal immigrants, illegal people who are in the country.
Who are going through the process.
And the fact is, yes, the focus is the people who have criminal records and whatever. The fact is What, do you just release the ones that don't? I mean, ICE has to operate according to the rules. If they find somebody that is actually not a green card carrying
is
document,
the problem. There's no due process, Tom. They are just taking them and sending them to, what is it, Alcatraz, whatever? Camp Atterbury?
If you don't have the papers that you should have.
All right, well, we'll leave that conversation right there. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for stopping in. Thank you. And we will be right back. All right, well, thank you for watching All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And also be sure to check out our All Indiana Politics podcast online over at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.